I'm going to talk. When I was asked to do this, I'm actually part of a company that's based here in Rotterdam. It's a Canadian-Dutch company, so this is becoming like my second home, and I really do appreciate it. I appreciate the organizers who invited me. This is an amazing undertaking when you look at it from this angle, and I think they've done an amazing job organizing it. What I'm going to talk to you about is some personal experience as it relates to innovation and how it's created economic and social transformation. And innovation as distinct from invention, which is the very beginning part of innovation. But in order for it to create real economic and social impact, it needs to involve all players in the economy, public policy network, everything that joins us all together in a collaborative way to make things work. So I also tried to connect this, and being so far from home, this is a webcast way of saying hi to my two young boys and maybe inspiring them a little bit as to what makes me motivated to do what I do. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what aspire to inspire means to me, a bit of background of what that's meant in a specific example that I participated in telecommunications, then talk a bit about what we're doing here in Rotterdam as it relates to water and trying to do what we can to eradicate parts of the water crisis that exists today. And then a little bit of a promotional end to the talk to give a bit of a kick to Rotterdam and why we're located here and what we think we can do from here. So when I look at aspire to inspire, it's to seek something of great or high value and to motivate people to achieve that greatness. It's a connected concept, but the key issue is value. What determines value? We've heard a bit about money here already, about social value, about environmental value, but more and more all the time, we're connecting these three pieces into a broader concept of what value means. And in aspiring to achieve something of great value, how do you motivate other people to join you in doing that? And that's where the trick is. And that's what we're trying to achieve and what we're doing. So when I kind of boil it down to some of the business leaders that I've dealt with, I've been very fortunate to work with some inspirational business leaders. One in particular, Naguib Sawiris, who I'll get to in a minute when we talk about telecommunications. But really, if you think about things that have been achieved in the last 100 years, they really were, at the beginning of the conceptual phase, thought to be unachievable, things that could never have happened. If you look at the Wright brothers, the first manned flights, they weren't really thinking about what was going to happen 100 years from now with aeronautical design. They were just trying to get off the ground and not crash. With medical proliferation of technology and pharmaceuticals, eradicated disease all around the planet. But it started with ideas, but it led to public policymakers and to investors who were willing to take the risks to achieve those things. With computers, Alan Turing, who is the founder of computers in most people's minds, it was conceptualized in the Second World War for a very specific purpose. Never did we ever imagine that the likes of Microsoft, IBM, every garage business of billionaires that currently exists today would actually have a computer in every car and every home and bathrooms and everything that we do every day in the developed world. And media started with digital screens to the point now where everything we do, we read on a screen. I don't see that many books in the crowd. I think that the original founders of Philips, who created some of this screen technology and digital imagery, may not be as happy as with the way it's all ended up. That there isn't that personal touch as it relates to the transfer of information and ideas. We're in a world now today where we're challenged by environmental, social, economic issues, which I believe are different than anything in the past 100 years, that require a whole new wave of innovators, inventors, public policymakers who can think in real time and who can move quicker than when we've ever moved before. I'm going to just talk about this in the context of telecom. Mobile phones were conceptualized back as far as the early 1900s when they were trying to be part of railway technology. Evolved into the into the 1950s. You see it in movies, from shoe phones and American TV to spy movies and James Bond with satellite phones. But we never would envision that virtually every of the 900 people we see here in the crowd would have a device that we get all of our information on. But when I got involved in mobile telecom in the early 1990s, it was really just being standardized with the GSM standards. And that's really what kicked it off from a global idea to a point where it was globally accepted and globally used around the world. And in the late 90s, as I mentioned, I met Naguib Sawiris. And this is where I believe the true inspiration comes. His idea was to achieve the unachievable. In Africa, the penetration rates were abysmal for basic phone service, pay phones, public phones. Less than 5% of the people in Africa had any form of communication. It had amazingly negative effects on the way the economies worked, but also the way the societies worked and the way information was exchanged, in the way of political discourse, in the way of ideas, and how people joined together in very, very large geographic areas with only newspapers and other standard devices to connect people. But when I met Naguib on a temporary assignment back in the late 1990s, he convinced me that somehow we would have 100 million phones in Africa. And some of the greatest inspiration comes from people who have what seemingly are crazy ideas. I thought he was crazy. We had business plans, which all kinds of spreadsheet people, oh, that's not possible. But he created a company with 6 people. I was very lucky to be one of them. And within 10 years, we had ourselves in our company over 100 million customers and over 100,000 employees in 10 years. Now, I'm not saying that to brag about what happened in that company, but the evolution of technology from idea to broad proliferation has now shrunk from 100 years or decades to a matter of years, in some cases within a year. And that's what we have to really deal with. Now, why water? This is what we're pursuing in Rotterdam. A similar situation inspired now by a trusted Dutch inventor, Piet Oosterling, who's a friend and a colleague who's invented many, many things, but brought them all to market. And he convinced me, after trying to search for what I was going to do next after telecom, to see what could be as impactful. He convinced me in a matter of minutes that water is the new gold. It's the new, depending on whatever commodity you want to trade, it is the new thing. It has to be the new thing for our societies to be able to develop and grow. And most of you would be familiar with some of the extremely dramatic stats that affect the water world today. 1 in 10 people in the next 10 years will not have access to the water they need to survive. By 2025, more than 2.8 billion people will not have water that they need to survive, basic survival. In terms of human consumption of water, most of the crisis is felt on the backs of young women and children who spend 6 to 10 hours a day collecting water for their families just to meet the basic needs of survival. So it's not surprising that every dollar invested, because one of the things that has to happen is we have to convince people that water is not just a charity, it's actually a basis of economic society that can be valued and that can create economic value. And every study you see that every dollar invested in water can generate as much as $12 in economic return. And every 90 seconds, which is a conservative estimate, a child dies from not having access to clean water. I can't think of anything that would be more inspirational than being part of a movement to make sure that that doesn't continue. Innovations are desperately needed. And this is innovation not just in the technology itself. We're deploying technology which is decentralized, relies on renewable energy. It works at the source, draws water from air. But there are many technologies. It's not just ours. It's a system of technologies that go from the urban centers, but all the way out into the rural centers. But also, most importantly, it affects virtually every business that operates today. Some of the biggest consumers in manufacturing, whether it's Coca-Cola or Heineken, which uses 11 liters of water every day to create 1 liter of beer. Every company is worried about this. Every person is worried about this as we go through the world. But what we need is a refocus on what it takes to invest in these technologies, but most importantly, finding guys like Naguib who are willing to take a massive amount of risk capital and deploy these technologies where they're needed the most. They do exist. Inspiration is right in front of us. There are a lot of organizations, both on the NGO side. Water.org is very familiar to people, charitywater.org. There's a lot of .orgs out there that are really getting the message out about how important this issue is, and they have great programs. Water.org has also created a system of microfinance to get water solutions into the communities that they're needed, but they do that in such a way that the local communities own them and operate them, and that's essential to getting these technologies deployed. Why Rotterdam? Well, I quite like it here, so that's one of the reasons why we're located here. But what I've come to learn about Rotterdam is it's a city that's currently in an innovation revival. There are a lot of organizations that sponsor innovation, but one of the really good things is if you compare it to the environment in which we're operating in Canada, there's a real link between government organizations, the NGOs that sponsor innovation, the innovators themselves, and a real concentration on impact investing. Even the local large conglomerates, whether it's Unilever or Philips or Royal Dutch Shell, they have massive CSR programs related to water. Some of them, in my view, don't actually communicate that nearly enough, because the more communication around this issue, the more we'll all pay attention to it. So the unmatched cooperation between the community, business, and NGO leaders, and also the universities, because as we travel around universities and look for cooperation with those universities, one thing that Rotterdam and the Netherlands, and more broadly, has right is the way that they treat IP. Innovation is not really, it's not the idea in and of itself. It's not the technology. It's not innovation unless it creates that social and economic change. And in order to do that, you need to monetize IP. You need to get it to the point where you work with market leaders to get those products into the market so that they can be useful and used for what they're intended. And in my experience, my world experience, I've found that the Netherlands is among the best at connecting these pieces together towards a solution to what we need to achieve. So if I go back to the original concept of aspire to inspire, and seek something of great quality, to me, I can't think of anything that's more important to be involved in than being part of the movement to eradicate water scarcity around the world. And nothing, in my view, would be more inspirational for others to do the same. So with that, I'll leave it. Thank you very much.